Hello YouTube, it's Lucas Snow from Aesthetics Interactive Studios here, and in today's Blender tutorial we are going to be learning about UV mapping and adding textures onto our objects with the use of UV mapping. For those who don't know what UV mapping is the way to add on textures accurately onto an object. We won't be adding anything onto this cube. Instead, we're going to be using a sphere. The reason we're going to be using a sphere because I want to make a planet-like kind of object. So, before we get cracking, we got to delete everything we got here. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually click on it. It's only because when I start my recording, it doesn't like have the thing set up, or it doesn't have me in the program. But never mind. So we're going to delete everything, and now I'm going to put my screencast keys on, like so. And now I'm going to just go there. So our screencast key is now on, which is handy, so you can see what I'm doing. And we're going to get cracking by adding a UV sphere. We're going over here to our create, and we can add our UV sphere from here, or we can just go down here and add mesh UV sphere, or you can just press the space key and type in add UV sphere. We're going to add UV sphere this way, and as you can see we have our UV sphere, which is a nice little ball. So let's go back to the tools. I don't like when things just don't look right to me. I know I'm weird, but we got our ball here. We're going to add the lamp because I'm going to go into material mode so you get an understanding of what's going on. So I'm going to just type in add lamp, and just going to put a point. I'm going to stick it here right now, and I'm going to go into material mode. It looks weird because it's not smooth. If I smooth it, you can get that more nicer look, but we're going to leave it flat for now. Before we start anything, we're going to need to add a material on it. And I'm just going to boost that up. Leave that as it is. And just increase that a bit. So it's nice and white. So, when it comes to UV mapping, you have to go into your edit mode. To go into edit mode, press the tab key. Already all the vertices are added. To get a better understanding of how UV mapping works, I'm just going to drag these up like so, and I'm going to go and click on this tab here, which at the moment it's timeline. Click on there, and we're going to go to UV image editor, and we have this. This allows you to see your faces, your polygons and vertices and edges, but nothing's shown yet because we have not UV mapped this sphere. To UV map this sphere, you could go to Edge and UV Unwrap, and you can just unwrap it. If I unwrap it, it comes out like that, and that's not what we want. We're gonna come up there. You could press U, and it's a shortcut for UV mapping. We could do a Smart UV, and click OK, and we come out with this. As you can see, it's a lot better than the last one, but it's not easy to understand it. So we're going to press Ctrl Z for that. What most people do, especially if you want to make a decent UV map, you have to mark your seams. Kind of like stitchings on your t-shirts or your coats. When you got your sleeves, and up the top of the sleeve that matches to your shirt's torso section, you notice that kind of stitching or seam that's on the side. That's what you do with UV mapping as well. So we're gonna deselect everything by pressing the A, and we are gonna change from our vertex to our edge, and we are going to hold down the, like if you ever watch one of my older tutorials on how to select multiple faces, just hold down the Alt key and then click the right mouse button, and it lets you select certain pieces. We're going to do that with edges. but we've got to select a certain point. Let's go into orthographic mode by pressing the numpad 5. 7 to look from the top. Then you got 1 for that and 3 for that. It's so I can see exactly what I'm seeing, because we want it to be equal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the Alt key and I'm just going to right click here, and as you can see it has selected that side of the object, and I'm going to do the same here. Ooh, I forgot to press keep that hold of the shift key whilst I do that. So now we got this dead snap cut in the middle. What we're going to do is we are going to press the space key and we're going to type in mark, and you got this mark seam. And now if I deselect that, you can see this red line. And what's this red line? That means that that's the cut. So now if I select everything, press the U key and go in Unwrap, you can see that our UV mapping is a lot more easier to understand. And this is handy as well. It makes it easier to identify certain pieces. When I just did a smart UV unwrap, it was all over the place. You wouldn't have known what was what. Marking your seams, kind of like your stitchings in your shirts and your trousers and things like that, helps you get a more better look on your object. So we now have our UV sphere UV mapped. I'm going to rotate this to a 45-degree angle so it fills up this actual box area. To do that, just make sure your mouse is down here, press the R key and just type 45, and then we're going to press enter. Then you can press the G key and press the Y key, or the X key actually is more important for this bit, and we can drag it into the middle, and then you can just press the S key and scale it like so. Let's just bring that in slightly a bit more, like there we go. So we now have our sphere now UV mapped, which is good news. As you can see here, you can actually select pieces on this and you can just move them out if you want to, but it's all fine how we got it. So with our object now selected, we are now going to put a texture on it. Now let's go into material mode for this. When you look at your objects in material mode, it is the same look as you get in the Blender game engine. So you know that when you add the texture on it, you know it's going to be there. We have a material set up, which is just material, and we got everything just how we want it. It's still got that boxy look to it, but we're going to leave it like that for the moment so I can show you. And what the hell happened to my box up here? I think it's because I dragged that up. Yes, it was so. Okay, we're going to go here where is your texture tab. Already it's got a texture called text, but it has nothing set. So, but we're going to name this clouds, because we're going to use the basic preset clouds like here, and we're going to put that on. As you can see, our object is meant to look like that, but it doesn't. And why it doesn't look like that in here, it's not because it's not smooth, because if I do smooth it by going down to smooth, you still can't see it. The reason it's not showing is because it's in render mode. As you can see, it shows in your render mode. If I smooth it now looks like some sort of gumball. But let's put it back to that. We will be able to see it in material mode in a minute, or in a few minutes, because we will be baking. But we're going to leave it as that. We're not going to have that color though. No, we're going to turn that color down to black. So it's not, at the moment it's on generated, And as you can see, regenerated, it's looks like that. It looks nicely around the whole thing. The only problem with that, however, is if I did move this object, sometimes, as you can see, as I move it, sometimes when you move objects like a plane mesh or things like that, sometimes this generated material doesn't move with the actual object. But we are going. I could change that to UV, and if I go back into render mode now, you can see it like that. But that's not what we want. We could go to object mode, and that looks just like generated. That's slightly different. We're going to leave it on generated because we're going to use that actual design for our sphere and its texture. You can also change its projection from flat to sphere. It doesn't change here, but when you come to spherical objects, always use its projection of a sphere so it goes around it, and instead of it being flat. But everything's okay. We could add a bump to that actually. To add a bump, just click on geometry here where it says normal. And as you can see from the material there, and I'll show you here, it's more bumpy. You can adjust that if you want to about 5, which makes it uglier. Or you can go down to 0.1, which then makes it a little more smoother. But I'm going to go about 0.5, like that. My computer monitor heats up when I go into render mode. But that's fine. We got our object and the material. But now what we want to do is we want to actually have that look on here. But why is it not looking like it on here? It is because we have to bake it. To bake it is just like rendering an image. You go into your scene here, your render tab, and we can go down to this word here that says bake. I generally always keep my anti-aliasing on to the highest, and then turn my compression up, just to make sure it actually renders how I want it to render. We just want to bake its texture, just onto here, just the texture. So if I go here and go to textures, and then I click on bake, it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because there's no images found to bake to. Even if I go like here, where it says selected, that means selected to active, but this object's active, and I go bake again, it gives me an error. It gives me an error because we have not set an actual image for the texture to bake on. To do this, back down in our UV editor, just start clicking new, and we can just type in let's just say clouds. I'll generally hard click that. Now you've got your image size, which is just like your resolutions. Now 1024 or 1024 by 1024 is a simple standard resolution for textures. You can go high by 2048 by 2048, which is what current video games are using. But each resolution's actually, all kinds of resolutions are used in games and animations for certain objects that seems relevant. Generally, higher resolutions are generally used for bigger scenes or bigger models. Lower resolutions are used for distant models that you ain't gonna get to. While 1024 by 1024 is reasonable for a simple object, we are gonna go up by 2048 by 2048. You could go higher to 4096 by 4096, or even higher than that by 8192 by 8192. But the higher you go, you might have more better detailed looking model and texture. However, the higher your resolution, the higher your memory is. And as you can see, we now have this blank image. And now if I go and bake it, this will take some time, so I will end up like cutting it down. If you look at my object now, you can see the clouds have now been baked on, which is what we wanted. We're going to need to save that, so you can press F3 or click down here and go to save as image. I am going to save it here. I'm just going to call it clouds PNG. Just create a new folder and go in tutorial textures. There's a lot of things here. That's because I do so much. Tutorial textures and cloud PNG. Oh, we're gonna call it clouds diffuse PNG because it's the texture, it's the color. So we'll save that image if he likes to. So that's saved. We're gonna do the same again, but this time we're gonna do a normal map bake. So we're gonna go back to here, but we're gonna change from textures to normal, and then we're gonna bake that. And as you can see, we now have this kind of colored object. For those who do not know what normal map is the object's bumpiness. Remember when I went into our texture mode here and went on our normal here, which is the bump map? Well, a normal map is used in video games primarily. On the basis is because what a normal map actually is and what it's used for is to capture a higher detailed model's design or its geometry and adds it onto a lower polygon version. This is clouds normal. And the reason they do that is so that when it comes to playing video games, you get that nice realistic looking object, but it's actually low polygon. I will actually do a more in-depth tutorial on normal mapping, but for this tutorial we're just setting up textures for our UV mapped sphere. So now we got that, we can now delete this texture. We can now move that away and change that back to timeline, or you can leave it as it is. But now for this sphere we are going to now go back to our texture and we're going to call this diffuse. And now we're going to have to find our diffuse texture, which is in our tutorial textures, and it's here. And as you can see, we're in material mode, and the texture we had that you could only see in render mode is now on our sphere. You can now see it. We're gonna add in our normal as well, so we're gonna normal, and we're gonna add in the normal map. Now normal map is a little different in terms of setup, so we're gonna add in our normal. As you can see, it's purple. We're gonna go to image sampling, and we're gonna go on normal map. Keep it on tangent because it's tangent shaded. We're just gonna hide that, and then we're gonna go to here, and we have this ugly looking material. The reason it looks like that is because we just had to click on here, your color space, and just click on the same thing again, and it should put it back to normal. Now if you smooth it, you get that bumpy looking object. Kind of looks like a moon. UV mapping is important for making textures for many things. Oh, excuse me. But video games use normal mapping and this kind of UV mapping and normal mapping and diffuse mapping. They also use what is known as specular maps for the specular lighting, but we haven't done that in this tutorial. This is to let you understand what is used for making UV maps. I will recap on how you make UV maps. If you are in your material, your edit mode on your object, you can press the U key and you can unwrap your object. Before you unwrap your object, you can go to your mesh and you have to try and you can make a seam. I mean, when I looked at it, actually, when I went into mesh, it just didn't. It said make seam when I typed it in. I don't know exactly where you find it here, but we went to our space kit bar and we typed in mark, and it came up with mark seam, and that's what we needed. But you have to have a certain selection on your object first, and then mark your seam. So when you unwrap it, it unwraps it in a kind of like a stitching like way, kind of. I mean, if you ever seen some tutorials, or if you ever watched any tutorials on character modeling, or if you've seen any textures of characters, you generally see that kind of ugly looking facial or face texture where it looks like the face has just been ripped open from behind. That is no different to what we have done here. We just ripped open our mesh and added and just put our texture over it. So what did we learn in this tutorial? We learned how to bake textures onto our objects. We have learned how to UV map an object. And we also learned how important it is for this UV mapping and baking texturing. Every video game you've played had been either pre-baked, and all textures are pre-baked as well, especially their normal mapping to get that realistic look to their objects. What we've done here is basically, if you were following this tutorial and done exactly what I've done, you have pretty much essentially made your very own spherical rock for the use in Blender game engine. And if I change our multi-texture on our shading to GeoSL and I press the P button, there you go. The same object, same material, same light up and texture. You have essentially created your own asset for a potential video game of your own. We will look at the Blender Games tutorial in another video. I'm Lucas, known from Aesthetics Interactive Studios. Thank you for watching.